One of the principles that is believed by science and physics, it was, or is, a universal causality model. Universal causality meant that everything in the universe has a cause and there's an effect. And that sounds really simple. You know, if you bump into a car and you damage the car, the cause is somebody bumped into you and the effect is the damage on the car. It's straightforward. You have to stop, car hits other car, and stop with the effect. There's the damage. Proof. This person caused that. This thing happened there. The problem with that is now we have to ask, in the chain of cause and effect, what caused the person to run into the car? Was it because they were preoccupied? Were they looking down at the time? Were they not paying attention to their driving? Were they drinking? Were they arguing with somebody? We could then go off and say, well, the cause of the car running into the car to cause the dent is because they were yelling and distracted by a person in a conversation. So the person was starting an argument, and the cause of this accident is not the car running into it and the damage to the car, it's the person talking to him. And then we could say, well, the reason why that person's talking to him at that moment is because this is the only time they had in a day. They only had a brief time to talk and drive. And the person driving actually was flirting with the person a couple days earlier. This spouse was watching that and was upset and jealous about it, and they yelled at the person at that time, and this is what led to the thing. So it's actually what the gentleman did who was driving was flirting with somebody that actually caused the person to then be jealous, that then caused the person to bump in the car, and then the effect is the damaged car. Now the person who's got the damaged car really doesn't really care. They have to narrow the focus back to the idea that ran into me, and that's just arbitrarily the cause of this. But then we could say, well, the reason why the person was flirting with the other person is because the person who's yelling has not been focused on it, has been focused on the children more so than the husband. The husband's not feeling the attention they want. And the children being born, coming from the sexual act from previous time, is the cause of that. Well, we could say, well, then, no, wait a minute now. The cause of that is because they made love somewhere down the line and they end up getting pregnant. Well, what made doing that? Well, they could say, well, the reason for that is because the parents put pressure on them that they need to have kids by a certain age. So the actual cause of the accident may be the parents now telling them they need to have kids by a certain age. And they go, well, then where'd that come from? Well, you could say, well, that's because of their religious belief. They need to have a certain number of kids by a certain number of age. Well, where does that go back to? Well, it goes back to anthropology and the primitive origins of the religious idealisms for the society. We could go on and keep going back to the chain of cause and effect until we eventually go back to the Big Bang. Well, wait a minute now, what caused the Big Bang? Is there a potential there in the universe? We could even go back and further into that, and we would go into an endless regression to an infinite regression, and we would never really know the causality of things. So we can arbitrarily stop at any level and blame anything, or we could do something that transcends cause and effect. Now, for our legal system, we're probably going to stick with the idea, you ran into me, you're the cause of that effect, that's it, you pay the price. And that's probably a narrowed mind compared to the real breadth of what's actually going on. But we have to narrow our minds sometimes to make the moralities of cause and effect. And the universal cause of cause and effect, universal rule of cause and effect, is actually partly a narrow-minded thinking. It's not really encompassing all of it because we can never trace it back. Do we really know the consequence of any action, and do we really know the cause of anything, really, in the chain of cause and effect? But then there's one place that we can go beyond causality. It's called acausality, where actually you've now extracted out space and time between events. And now you realize that maybe the event that occurred, the bumping the car, could actually go, well, the person that was actually being bumped like that, maybe they needed to be hit from behind because deep inside their consciousness, they actually didn't want that car anymore, and they wish somebody would come in and run into it so they could get an insurance policy to get a new car. We could say, well, the reason for that is because the wife is yelling at them because that's the same old car we've been driving around. Why don't you get a new car? And we could go into cause and effect in the other direction of the effect and look at the cause of that effect from the effect side. Or we could go and transcend that and go into an acausal state by realizing that it all based on perception. Think about that. Imagine if somebody comes up to you and slaps you across the face and you go, oh my God, and you go to your therapist and you say, well, that person arbitrarily came up to me and slapped me. I wouldn't do anything, I was just standing there, and she comes up and slaps me. And the therapist says, well, were you looking at him in a weird way? Well, I wasn't aware of it, but maybe I looked at him in a weird way, and maybe somebody had raped the person a month earlier, and you looked with the same type of look as the person that raped him, and the person was responding out of a reflex in the subconscious mind, and the person is now, you're now seeming to be the innocent victim, but maybe she thinks that you're actually victimized her because of the stacked up association you made from the original event. We can go everywhere, but the only way out of this loop, this endless search for this causality that arbitrarily has to be narrowed down in our, quote, moral legal system, is to go into an acausal state, which is this. If you ask, at the exact moment somebody comes up and slaps you or runs into your car, you ask this question: where and when have I displayed and demonstrated that behavior in my life, in my form? You'll find out that whatever you see in others that you're emotionally reacting to is actually a result of things you have inside that you've been judging inside yourself in some form, or you wouldn't react. And in the process of doing it, you may go in and find where you've done that. And what happens if you find out you've done the exact same thing to the same degree, quantitatively and qualitatively? And then you realize, who might have judged them? Now you've taken something you thought was a terrible event and you softened the judgment a bit. Then if you ask, how did it benefit me? If you saw it as a negative event or a positive event and you ask what's the upside or the downside and brought it back into equilibrium, you may actually reach a point where you realize, well, you know what? I'm not even upset with this. And I don't even see it as an event. I just see it as a synchronicity of something reminding me of what I need to grow in life. And now you realize maybe I and it are inseparable. Maybe this is a synchronicity that's going on in my brain that's making sure that I grow. And then if you went over there and found out not only how it benefited you, but where has this person done the opposite? And at the exact moment this person did it, where was somebody doing the opposite in your life to find out the pair of opposites that was going on? And what if you asked the question, if they hadn't done it, what would have been the drawback? And what if you neutralized all of them and there was nothing there except a tear of gratitude and a deep appreciation for the event? And you didn't even label it something good or bad. You didn't even separate it from your own existence. You're now in a world of acausality, and you've transcended the judgment and the circlet, infinite regress of causality. That you get caught in blame and credit and shame and all that stuff that weighs you down with really no degree of perfect certainty. But when you get to a point where you actually have it all balanced and you actually have a centered state, that acausal state is freeing. I always say when I'm working with people that no therapy is ever complete till cause equals effect in space-time. At the moment the event occurred, the moment you perceive the event, you have created it to be positive or negative, a heaven or a hell, and the second you label it with a narrowed mind by not seeing all the different ramifications and all the benefits out of it to balance it, and you arbitrarily put this as the causality, now you have a blame, now you have a judgment, now you have a thing that weighs you down emotionally. But what if you actually neutralized it all out and you looked at it and saw how it served you and you're in a state of grace for that experience? You've transcended causality, you've seen things with certainty, you've freed yourself up, and you're not caught with all this endless relooping psychology that sits there that keeps you shrunk instead of expanded. So I just want to take that moment to kind of fry your brain a second and make you look at causality from a new perspective. I always say that no therapy is ever complete till cause equals effect in space-time. As long as you add space and time to the mind, you're keeping yourself from seeing the real picture. Your soul, if you will, the state of unconditional love, extracts out space and time in the mind and is acausal. But your mind goes in and judges by going into causalities and getting trapped in its little moral box. Transcend that little box and get in touch with what's really going on and watch how all of a sudden you're lightened up instead of weighed down.